Wine and Jungkook had always been close. They met during their first year at university, quickly becoming best friends. Wine, with her bright smile and caring nature, initially drew people to her, but it was Jungkook who managed to capture her attention. They shared classes, studied together in the library, and spent hours talking about their dreams and fears. One day, after a long study session, Jungkook decided he couldn't keep his feelings hidden anymore. As they walked across the campus under a canopy of autumn leaves, he took a deep breath and turned to her. Wine, he began, his voice slightly shaky. There is something I need to tell you. Wine stopped walking and looked at him with concern. What is it, Jungkook? You look serious. He hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. I think I am in love with you, he finally confessed. His eyes locked onto hers. Wine's eyes widened in surprise. She had not expected this. Jungkook, you don't have to say anything, he quickly added. Sensing her hesitation, I just needed you to know how I feel. For a moment, there was silence between them. Wine could feel her heart pounding. She had always felt a strong bond with Jungkook, but she never thought it could be more than friendship. I'm not sure what to say. Wine admitted, I care about you a lot, Jungkook. I just need some time to think. Jungkook nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. Take all the time you need, he said softly. I will wait. Over the next few weeks, Wine found herself thinking about Jungkook more and more. She realized that his confession had stirred something inside her, something she had not acknowledged before. The more she thought about it, the more she realized how much she cared for him. One evening, as they were studying together in their usual spot at the library, Wine finally decided to speak up. Jungkook, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I have been thinking about what you said. Jungkook looked up from his notes, his heart skipping a beat. And Wine took a deep breath, her cheeks flushing. I think I might be in love with you too. A wide smile spread across Jungkook's face. Really? Wine nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. Yes, really. From that moment on, their relationship changed. They went from being best friends to being something more. They were inseparable, sharing everything from their hopes for the future to their deepest fears. A year into their relationship, Jungkook decided he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Vine. He planned a special date at their favorite spot, a small, secluded part where they often went to escape the pressures of university life. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jungkook got down on one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. Wine, he said, his voice filled with emotion. Will you marry me? Tears filled Wine's eyes as she nodded. Yes, Jungkook, yes, I will. They embraced, and Jungkook slipped the ring onto her finger. It was a simple, beautiful ring, just like their love, pure and uncomplicated, or so they thought. After their wedding, things began to change. Jungkook's mother, Mrs. Joan, was not pleased with their marriage. She had always hoped her son would marry someone from a wealthy family, and Vine, a simple girl with no significant background, did not fit her expectations. One evening, after a long day at university, Vine came home to find Mrs. Joan waiting for her in the living room. Her expression was cold, her disapproval evident. Wine, Mrs. Joan began, her tone sharp. We need to talk. Wine, sensing the tension, sat down on the edge of the sofa. What is it, Mrs. Joan? Mrs. Joan frowned, not bothering to hide her disdain. I saw you today with a man. Who was he? Wine's eyes widened in surprise. Oh, that was just Minho, my classmate. We were discussing a group project. Mrs. Jones from Deep End. I don't like you being close to the men. Wine, you are married now. Wine felt a knot form in her stomach. Mrs. Joan, I promise it was just about the project. I would never do anything to hurt Jungkook. Mrs. Jones stood up, her expression stern. Just remember what I said. I will not have you tarnishing this family's reputation. Wine nodded, feeling a sense of dread settle in her chest. She knew Mrs. June did not approve of her, but she had not realized how deep the resentment went. A few days later, while Vine was at a cafe with Minho discussing their project, Mrs. June saw them again. This time, she immediately called Jungkook. Jungkook, she said sharply over the phone, I saw your wife again today with that same man. Laughing and being very close, you need to come home right now. Jungkook's heart sank. He trusted Vine, but hearing his mother's words filled with doubt, okay, mom, I will be there soon, he replied, hanging up the phone. When Jungkook got home, Mrs. Jones was waiting for him, her expression grave. You need to talk to your wife, Jungkook. She's embarrassing us. Jungkook clenched his jaw, torn between his love for wine and the seed of doubt his mother had planted. When Wine came home, he was sitting in the living room waiting for Wine to begin. His voice strained. We need to talk. Wine could see the tension in his eyes. What's wrong, Jungkook? I heard you were with Minwoo again today. He sat, trying to keep his voice calm. Wine sighed, frustrated. Yes, we were just working on our project. Jungkook, I told you about it. Jungkook's expression hardened. And why do you always have to be with him? Don't you realize how it looks? Wine felt tears prick at her eyes. Jungkook, he's just a friend. You know I love you. Do I? Jungkook snapped. Because my mother thinks otherwise, she thinks you are being unfaithful. Wine's heart broke at his words. How could you believe that? She whispered, tears streaming down her face. I would never cheat on you. Jungkook looked away, his face conflicted. I don't know what to believe anymore. Wine stood there, her heart itching with pain and betrayal. She had never imagined that their love would be questioned like this, especially not by Jungkook. The tension between Vine and Jungkook grew over the following weeks. Mrs. Jones continued to fuel Jungkook's doubts, constantly reminding him of Vine's behavior with Minho. Despite Vine's assurances, Jungkook found himself questioning her more and more. One evening, after an argument with Jungkook about Minho, Vine decided to leave the house for a bit to clear her misunderstanding. As she walked through the park where Jungkook had proposed to her, memories flooded back, and she couldn't stop the tears from falling. Why can't he just trust me? Vine whispered to herself, her voice choked with emotion. Meanwhile, at home, Jungkook was restless. He knew he was hurting Vine and it tore him apart. But his mother's words had a strong hold over him, feeding his insecurities. When Vine finally returned home, Jungkook was waiting for her, his face a mix of anger and sadness. Where have you been? He demanded. I just needed some air. Vine replied, her voice tired. Jungkook, I can't keep doing this. You either trust me or you don't. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Wine, it's not that simple. Wine shook her head, fresh tears in her eyes. It is that simple, Jungkook. You either believe in our love or you let your mother destroy it. Jungkook's silence spoke volumes. Wine felt her heart shatter into pieces. She turned away, walking toward their bedroom. I'm going to bed. She said quietly, we can talk in the morning if you want. Jungkook watched her go, his heart itching with regret and confusion. He knew he loved her, but his mother's words continued to haunt him, pushing him further away from the woman he adored. The next morning, Wine woke up with a heavy heart. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts about Jungkook and the growing distance between them. She got out of bed quietly, hoping to avoid another confrontation. As she made her way to the kitchen, she heard voices. Jungkook and his mother, Mrs. Joon, were already up. Wine paused at the doorway, listening to their conversation. I just don't understand why she's always out. Mrs. Jones was saying, her tone sharp and filled with disdain. Doesn't she have responsibilities as your wife? She should be at home, not gallivanting around with other men. Jungkook sighed heavily, his voice weary. Mom, we talked about this. It's not like that. She's just working on a project with her classmate. Is that what she told you? Mrs. Jones scoffed. You are too trusting, Jungkook. She's clearly hiding something from you. Vine felt her stomach twist with anxiety. She knew she had to face them, so she took a deep breath and stepped into the kitchen. Good morning, she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Jones immediately turned her glare toward Vine. Oh, look who's finally up, she sneezed. The wife, who's too busy with other men to care about her own husband. Vine's eyes widened in shock. Mrs. Jones, that's not fair. I have done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong? Mrs. Jones' voice rose with anger. You are being parading around with that Minho boy, making a fool out of Jungkook and his family. Wine glanced at Jungkook, hoping he would defend her, but he remained silent, his face troubled. His lack of response hurt her more than his mother's words. Jungkook, Wine pleaded softly, you know me, you know I wouldn't do anything to hurt you. Jungkook looked down, avoiding her gaze. I don't know what to think anymore, he muttered. Mrs. Jones smirked, taking advantage of his uncertainty. See, even Jungkook isn't sure about you anymore. You have brought this on yourself, Vine. Tears welled up in Vine's eyes. Why are you doing this, Mrs. Jones? Why can't you just accept that I love your son and would never betray him? Because you are not good enough for him, Mrs. Jones snapped. You never were and you never will be. Vine felt like she had been slapped. She turned to Jungkook again, desperate for him to say something, anything, to stand up for her, but he just stood there, torn between his mother and his wife, saying nothing. Feeling utterly defeated, Vine wiped away her tears. I can't do this anymore, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't keep fighting for a love that you're not willing to defend, Jungkook. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. Her heart heavy with despair. She needed to get away, even if just for a little while, to clear her mind and figure out what to do next. Later that morning, Vine left for university, trying to hold herself together. Her mind was clouded with the harsh words from Mrs. Jones and the silence from Jungkook. She needed a break from everything, a moment to breathe. As she reached the university, she found her close friend June waiting for her near the entrance. June, with her warm smile and gentle nature, always seemed to know when something was wrong. Wine, June called out, waving her over. You look so stressed. What happened? Wine tried to muster a smile but failed. It's complicated, June. I don't even know where to start. June frowned and linked her arm with Vine's, leading her towards a quiet bench under a large tree. Come on, let's sit down. You can talk to me about anything, you know that. Vine nodded, feeling a lump from in her throat. She had been holding back her emotions for so long that she wasn't sure she could keep them in any longer. As they sat down, the words spilled out of her. It's Jungkook's mom. Vine began, her voice trembling. She hates me no matter what I do. She always finds something wrong. She even thinks I'm cheating on Jungkook with Minho. Just because we were working on a project together. June's eyes widened in concern. Oh, why I had no idea it was this bad? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Vine wiped away a stray tear. I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems. And I thought things would get better, but they are just getting worse. Jungkook doesn't even defend me when his mother says these things. He just stands there. June squeezed Vine's hand gently. Vine, you can't keep letting this happen. You need to stand up for yourself. You deserve to be respected, especially in your own home. Vine sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. I know, but it's hard. I don't want to cause more tension between Jungkook and his mom. I just want peace. June, Shook her head firmly. Why listen to me? You can't sacrifice your own happiness and self respect for the sake of avoiding conflict. If you keep letting his mother treat you this way, it's only going to get worse. You need to have a serious talk with Jungkook. He needs to understand how much this is hurting you. Wyan nodded slowly, her friend's words sinking in. You're right, Jian. I need to talk to him. I can't keep living like this. Jian gave her an encouraging smile. That's the spirit. Remember, Wyan, you are strong. You have always been strong, and you're not alone in this. I'm here for you, no matter what. Wine managed a small smile in return, feeling a bit lighter, knowing that she had someone on her side. Thank you, June. I don't know what I would do without you. June hugged her tightly. You will get through this, Wine, and I will be right here cheering you on. Wine's phone buzzed with a message from Song Cho, a friend she had not seen in a while. He had recently returned from Australia after completing his degree and had his own business now. Song Cho had always been kind to her, and she was pleased to hear from him. The message read, Hi Wine, I'm back in town. Can we meet up at the cafe near campus? Wine thought about it for a moment and decided it would be nice to see an old friend. She quickly dialed Jungkook, who was working at his father's business that day, as he occasionally did. Hey Jungkook, she said when he answered. Songjo, my old friend from Australia, just messaged me. He's back in town and wants to meet up. I'm heading to the cafe to catch up with him. Just wanted to let you know. Jungkook, who was currently dealing with some paperwork in his father's office, responded casually. All right, thanks for letting me know. Enjoy your time. I will be here with dad for a while. Wan smiled. Okay, see you later. She didn't mention that Song Cho had always shown an interest in her, as she didn't want to create unnecessary tension. Wan arrived at the cafe and found Song Cho already seated at a table, his warm smile making her feel instantly at ease. He stood up as she approached and greeted her with a hug. Wan, it's so good to see you, Song Cho exclaimed. How have you been? I'm good, Sungjo. It's been a while. I'm glad we could meet up. They settled into their seats and ordered coffee. As they talked, they reminisced about old times, laughed about sharing memories, and catch up on each other's lives. The conversation flowed easily, and Vine found herself enjoying the relaxed atmosphere and Sungjo's company. During the chat, Vine took a sip of her coffee, and a small milk stain appeared on the side of her lips. Songjo, ever the gentleman, reached out to gently wipe it away with a napkin. Here, you have got a little something. He said with a friendly smile. Wine laughed, slightly embarrassed but appreciative of the gesture. Thanks, Songjo. A fellow cafe patron had been recording the interaction, intrigued by the affectionate exchange. The video captured Songjo wiping the milk stain from Wine's lip and the two of them laughing together. The recording was sent to someone in Wine's family who was not pleased with the situation. Later that evening, Wine returned home feeling content after a planned meeting with Songjo. As she entered the living room, she was met with an unexpected and unsettling scene. Jungkook and Mrs. Joan were sitting on the sofa, their expressions cold and disapproving. Hi, Jungkook. Hi, Mrs. Joan. Wine greeted them, trying to remain calm despite the tension she felt. Before she could move away, Mrs. Jones stood up and walked over to her with a fierce look. Without warning, she slapped Wine hard across the face. The force of the slap left Wine stunned, her hand flying to her cheek as tears welled up in her eyes. Tears welled in Wine's eyes as she stood there. Feeling the sting of Mrs. Jones' slap and the weight of the confrontation, her heart was pounding and she struggled to hold back sobs as Mrs. Jones continued to glare at her with a smirk of satisfaction. Chunko, catch between his anger and confusion, remained silent, unsure of how to handle the escalating situation. Wine took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. I can't do this anymore. She said, her voice trembling. I'm done with all of this. Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel and walked quickly to their bedroom. She grabbed a few essential clothes and belongings, stuffing them into a bag. Her hands shook as she packed, her mind racing with the pain of the day. Mrs. Jones watched with a look of disdain, her smirk widening. Leaving? Are we good pretense? Maybe you will finally learn how to behave. Jungkook, who had been watching the scene unfold, felt a surge of frustration and guilt. He had never seen Wine so upset, and the sight of her leaving struck him deeply. As Wine walked out of the house, he felt a pang of regret. This was the first time she had ever left him, and it was a blow he had not expected. Wine hurried to her car, her vision blurred by tears. She fumbled with her keys and managed to start the engine. As she drove away, she dialed Songjo's number, her hands shaking. Songjo, it's me. I don't know where else to go. Can I come over? Songjo's voice was filled with concern. Of course, fine. Come to my apartment. I'm here for you. Wine drove to Songjo's apartment, tears streaming from her face. The city lights blurred past her as she made her way through the streets, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. When she finally arrived at Songjo's place, she barely had the strength to get out of the car. Songjo opened the door as soon as she knocked, his expression shifting from confusion to worry as he saw her tear-streaked face. Why? What happened? He asked, pulling her into a comforting hug. Come in, let's talk. Wine was barely able to speak through her sobs. It's a mess. My mother in law, she slapped me. Jungkook didn't stop her. I just needed to get away. Songjo led her inside, settling her on the couch and offering her a warm blanket. You are safe here. Take your time. I'm so sorry you are going through this. Songjo's apartment. Wine sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket while Songjo brewed some tea in the kitchen. The apartment was warm and comforting, a stark contrast to the turmoil she had left behind. As Songjo returned with 2 cups of tea, he sat beside Wine and handed her a cup. Here, this should help a little. Wine took the cup, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you, Songjo. I really needed this. Songja looked at her with concern. So tell me everything. I want to understand what happened. Wine took a deep breath, her voice still wavering. It's been so difficult. Jungkook's mother has always been hostile toward me. But yesterday it's reached a breaking point. She slapped me because she thought I was seeing someone else. Even though it wasn't true. Songja's eyes widened in shock. She slapped you. That's awful, Wine. I can't believe Jungkook let that happen. Wine nodded, tears brimming again. I was hoping he did stand up for me, but he just stood there. I felt so alone, so I decided to leave. I couldn't stay there anymore. Sungri's expression hardened with anger. I have known Jungkook for a long time. Our fathers are business partners, and I have always respected him. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined. I'm so sorry you are going through this. Wyan looked down at her tea, her voice trembling. I didn't want to burden anyone with my problems. I thought I could handle it, but it's just too much. Songju placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You are not a burden, you are my friend, and you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You can stay here as long as you need. You don't have to face this alone. Wine managed a small, grateful smile. Thank you, Songju. I don't know what I would do without your support. Songju's expression softened. I'm here for your wine, whatever you need. Just let me know. Joan household. Jungkook sat alone in his room, the silence around him amplifying his feelings of guilt and regret. His mother, meanwhile, was sitting in the living room, a small smile of satisfaction on her face. However, as the evening wore on and she saw Jungkook's cold, distant demeanor, her satisfaction began to wane. Jungkook finally walked out of his room, his face a mix of frustration and sadness. He found his mother lounging on the sofa and he approached her with a pained expression. Mom, we need to talk. Jungkook sat, his voice tight with emotion. Mrs. Jones looked up, surprised about what. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, struggling to articulate his feelings. About wine, I know you are upset, but the way you treated her it was too much. Mrs. June raised an eyebrow defensively. I was only trying to make sure she respects the family. She was acting inappropriately. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. She slapped her. How could you think that was acceptable? She's my wife, and you have no right to treat her like that. Mrs. Jones' expression faltered, her smirk fading. I didn't mean to cause so much pain, but she was crossing lines, and I felt it was necessary. Jungkook shook his head, his voice growing louder. No, it wasn't necessary. You were pushing her away, and now she's gone. Do you even understand how much this is affecting me? I'm not just angry, I'm heartbroken. Mrs. Jones' demeanor shifted, a look of regret appearing on her face. I didn't know it would hurt you like this. Jungkook's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a deep sadness. Well, it has, and now I have to live with the consequences of your actions. I just hope you realize that this wasn't the right way to handle things. Wine spent the next few days at Sungju's apartment, finding solace and a sense of normalcy in her friend's supporting presence. Songjo made sure she was comfortable, often preparing her favorite meals and checking in on her well being. One morning, Songju prepared breakfast and brought it to Wyan in the guest room. He knocked gently on the door before entering. Good morning, Wyan. He said with a warm smile. I made some pancakes. I thought you might like a good start to the day. Wyan, still in her pajamas, managed a grateful smile as she sat up in bed. Thank you, Songjo. You have been so kind. I don't know how to thank you enough. Songjo, set the tray down on the bedside table. You don't need to thank me. We are friends, and I'm here to help. If you need anything, just let me know. As they ate breakfast together, Songjo continued to offer words of comfort and encouragement. You are in a safe place and you don't have to rush into making any decisions. Wine nodded, feeling a sense of calm in Songjo's presence. I'm starting to think more clearly now. It's been hard, but I appreciate everything you are doing. Later in that day, Songju suggested they take a walk in the nearby park to help Wine clear her mind. They strolled through the park, chatting about lighter topics and enjoying the fresh air. Songju made sure to keep the conversation positive, knowing that Wine needed some distraction from her troubles. Back at the Jown household, Jungkook was struggling with his emotions. After one's departure, he had been reflecting on the events and trying to make sense of everything. He felt a growing sense of regret and confusion. One afternoon, Jungkook received a call from a mutual acquaintance who worked with Sungjo's family. The acquaintance, noticing the tension and the recent drama, couldn't resist mentioning Wine's current living situation. Hey Jungkook, the acquaintance began. I heard from a few people that Wine is staying with Songjo now. Seems like she's found a place to stay temporarily. Jungkook was taken aback. What? Songjo? Why would she stay with him? The acquaintance explained. Apparently, things got pretty bad at your place. From what I heard, Wine left after a big argument with your mother. Songju offered her a place to stay and she accepted. I think he's been really supportive of her. Jungkook's heart sank as he listened. He had heard of Songju's kindness and knew that he was a good person, but the news stirred up a mix of emotions, guilt, regret, and a deep sense of loss. Songju and Wine continued to grow closer as friends during her stay. He was attentive and considerate, often finding small ways to brighten her days. Whatever it was, by bringing her favorite snacks or planning relaxing activities. He made sure Wyatt felt cared for. One evening, as they were watching a movie together, Sungju glanced at Wyatt, noticing her thoughtful expression. You seem lost in thought. Is everything okay? Wine turned to him, her expression conflicted. It's just, I'm thinking about Jungkook and everything that happened. I didn't expect to be in this situation. Songjo gave her a reassuring smile. It's normal to feel that way. Just remember, you're not alone. I'm here for you, and we will get through this together. Pine felt a pang of gratitude, appreciating Sungju's support and understanding. That night, Jungkook lay in bed, unable to sleep. His mind replayed the events over and over, and he couldn't shake the feeling of guilt and regret. He thought about Vine, about how she had been treated, and the reality of her staying with Sungju. Jungkook picked up his phone and dialed Sungju's number, hoping to speak with him directly. After a few rings, Sungju answered, Hello. Sungjo, this is Jungkook. Jungkook sat, his voice tense. I heard about wine staying with you. I wanted to talk to you about it. Sungjo's tone was cautious but polite. Sure, Jungkook, what's on your mind? I'm really sorry for how things turned out. Jungkook admitted, I regret how I handled everything and I regret not standing up for Wine. I know she's in a difficult place and I want to make things right. Songjo listened, his expression thoughtful. I appreciate your apology, Jungkook. One is a good person and she's been through a lot. I am just trying to support her as best as I can. Jungkook sighed. I understand. I'm trying to find a way to fix things to make amends. I hope she can forgive me. Songjo offered a reassuring tone. I hope so too. Wine deserves to be treated with respect and love. I will do what I can to help her. Later that day, Sungju approached Wine as she was preparing to leave the university. Wine, I've been thinking maybe it's time you found a place of your own. You don't have to stay here indefinitely. Wine shook her head. I appreciate your offer, Sungju, but I want to find my own apartment. I need to start over and have my own space. Songju looked concerned. Are you sure? I don't mind if you stay longer. I want to make sure you are okay. Wine sighed, I'm sure I need to do this for myself. I don't want to be a burden. Songji's expression softened. Okay, but promise me you will take care of yourself. If you need anything, you know where to find me. Wine nodded. Thank you, Songjo. I really mean it. The next day, Wine and Jungkook found themselves in the same university class. Jungkook tried to catch Wine's eye, but she deliberately avoided him. Her silence was a stark contrast to her usual demeanor, and Jungkook felt the sting of her rejection with each passing moment. Wine sat with her friend June, who noticed the tension. You have been quiet today. Wine, is everything okay? June asked, concerned. Wine forced a small smile, just dealing with some things. I will be fine. As the class progressed, Jungkook's attempts to engage with Wine went unnoticed. He felt a growing sense of frustration and helplessness, knowing that he needed to make amends but struggling to find a way to approach her. Wine and Jean sat in the university cafeteria, chatting and enjoying their coffee. The atmosphere was relaxed, and Wine was trying to push her troubles to the back of her mind. Suddenly, Jungkook appeared in the doorway, his gaze fixed on Wine. She noticed the change in Wine's demeanor as she stiffened. Jungkook walked over and, without a word, took Wine's wrist in a firm grip. His actions were swift and determined, leading her out of the cafeteria and into an empty classroom down the hall. Wine struggled slightly but didn't pull away. She knew that confronting Jungkook was inevitable. And the classroom seemed as good a place as any of a private conversation. Inside the classroom, Jungkook closed the door and turned to face Wine. His eyes were filled with a mix of desperation and remorse. Why did you block my number, Wine? Jungkook asked, his voice laced with frustration. I have been trying to reach you. Wine crossed her arms, her expression cold. I didn't want to talk to you. You didn't stand up for me. You let your mother treat me like that. Jungkook's expression softened and he stepped closer. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. My mother wants to apologize too, but she's afraid of how you will react. Wine's eyes narrowed. I don't know if I can just forgive and forget. It's not that simple. Jungkook's voice dropped to a pleading tone. Please, Wine, I have been reflecting on everything. I realize how wrong I was, and I'm truly sorry. I know it won't be easy to make things right, but I want to try. Wine remained silent, her gaze locked on Jungkook. Jungkook took a deep breath and stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. I need you to know that I'm committed to making amends. I have been a fool and I have hurt you. I'm asking for your forgiveness. Without warning, Jungkook gently cupped Wine's face in his hands and pressed his forehead against hers. His lips brushed against hers in a soft, lingering kiss. Wine's breath catch in her throat as she felt the tenderness of his touch. The kiss was both a plea and a confession of his feelings. Jungkook pulled back slightly, his forehead still touching hers. I'm so sorry, Wine. Please give me a chance to make things right. Wine's heart raced as she looked into his eyes. She could see the genuine remorse and love in his gaze. Despite her stubbornness, she felt a flicker of the connection they once shared. After their emotional conversation in the classroom, Jungkook gently took Wine's hand and led her out of the university. He guided her to his car, his movements careful and considerate. Wine followed him quietly, her heart still conflicted but open to the possibility of healing. As they drove to Jungkook's home, the tension between them began to ease. Jungkook glanced over at Vine, his expression a mix of hope and anxiety. I want you to know that I'm really committed to making things right. My mother has agreed to apologize to you, and I hope we can find a way to move forward. Vine looked out of the window, her thoughts racing. I appreciate that, Jungkook. I just need to see that things will change. When they arrived home, Jungkook led Vine into the living room where his mother was waiting. Mrs. Jones sat on the sofa, her expression serious but softened with a hint of remorse. Jungkook turned to his mother. Mom, this is Vine. She's agreed to hear you out. Mrs. Jones stood up, her face showing genuine regret. Vine, I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I was wrong to judge you and act out of anger. I have been reflecting on my actions and I realize now how much I have hurt you. Wine met her gaze, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. Thank you for apologizing. It means a lot to me. Mrs. Jones stepped closer. I understand if you're still upset, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I want us to have a peaceful. And respectful relationship. Wine took a deep breath, her voice steady. I appreciate your apology. It's been difficult, but I believe in forgiveness. I want to start fresh and see if we can build a better understanding. Shankuk looked relieved, his shoulders relaxing as he heard Wine's words. Thank you, Wine. I know this isn't easy, but I promise to do everything I can to support you and make things better. Over the next few weeks, things began to improve. Jungkook made conscious efforts to show Wine how much he cared and valued her. He supported her decisions and included her in family activities, trying to make up for the past mistakes. Wine, for her part, made an effort to build a positive relationship with Mrs. Jones. It wasn't always easy, but she was determined to give their relationship a chance. They began to find common ground, and Mrs. Jones made genuine efforts to be more understanding and supportive. One evening, the family sat down for dinner together. The atmosphere was much lighter, filled with laughter and shared stories. Wan and Jungkook exchanged glances, both feeling a renewed sense of hope for their future. As they finished their meal, Jungkook took Wan's hand and squeezed it gently. Thank you for giving us a chance. Wan, I know we have had our struggles, but I'm committed to making things right. Wan smiled, her heart warmed by his words. I'm glad we are working things out. I believe we can build a happy future together. Mrs. Jones, observing their interaction, nodded in approval. I'm grateful that we are moving forward positively. I hope we can all continue to support and respect each other. Wine decided it was the perfect moment to share her news. Jungkook noticed the sparkle in her eyes and the smile she couldn't quite hide. What's going on, Wine? Jungkook asked, his tone playful yet curious. Wine took a deep breath and reached for Jungkook's hand across the table. I have some news. We are going to be parents. For a moment, there was silence as Jungkook processed the words. Then his eyes widened with joy, and a broad smile spread across his face. Are you serious? We are having a baby? Why nodded, her own smile matching his. Jungkook jumped up from his chair and pulled Wine into a tight embrace. This is amazing, Wine. I can't believe it. Mrs. Jones, who had been watching the exchange, felt tears well up in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away and stood up. Joining the couple, congratulations, my dear, she said softly, placing a gentle hand on Wine's shoulder. This is wonderful news. Wine looked at Mrs. Jones, her heart swelling with warmth. Thank you, Mom. I'm so happy to be bringing a new life into this family. As the weeks passed, Mrs. Jones' excitement grew and she became extremely protective of Wine. She insisted on taking over most of the household chores, not allowing Wine to lift a finger. Wine, you're not doing anything today, Mrs. Jones declared one morning as she catch Wine reaching for a mop. You need to rest and take care of yourself and the baby. I will handle all the cleaning. Wine chuckled, appreciating the concern but also feeling a bit guilty. I'm fine, really. I don't want you to overwork myself. Nonsense, Mrs. Jones replied firmly. This is my grandchild we are talking about. I want to make sure everything is perfect for you both. Just focus on staying healthy and happy. Jungkook too was overjoyed and constantly jotted down wine. He would often come home with little gifts, some baby clothes, plush toys, and sometimes flowers for wine. The love and care from both Jungkook and his mother made Wine's pregnancy a joyous time. As Van's pregnancy progressed, the family's bond grew even stronger. Mrs. Jones, who once had reservation about Wine, now treated her like a cherished daughter. She would often sit with Wine, discussing baby needs and preparing for the arrival of the new family member. Jungkook, who had always been protective, became even more attentive. He would hold Wine close at night, his hand resting gently on her growing belly, whispering to the baby. The love that filled their home was palpable, and Wine couldn't have been happier. As the months passed, Wine's pregnancy became the center of attention in the Joan household. The nursery was decorated with care, filled with soft pastel colors, plush toys, and a crib that Jungkook had personally chosen. Mrs. Jones continued to fuss over Wine, ensuring she was comfortable and well fed. The family's excitement grew with each passing day as the due date approached. One evening, Jungkook and Vine were sitting together in the living room, talking about their hopes and dreams for the baby. Jungkook held Vine's hand, his thumb gently caressing her fingers. I can't wait to meet our little one, he said, his voice full of warmth. I wonder if they will have your eyes or my stubbornness. Vine laughed softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. I just hope they are healthy and happy. That's all that matters to me. Mrs. Jones, who was knitting a tiny sweater nearby, looked up with a smile. I have a feeling this baby will bring so much joy to our lives. I can't wait to spoil them. The atmosphere was peaceful, filled with love and deception. However, life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. A few weeks before Wine's due date, she began to feel uneasy. It started with mild discomfort. But soon the pain became more intense. Wine knew something was wrong and she quickly called out to Jungkook. Jungkook, I think it's time. Wine said, her voice laced with both excitement and fear. Jungkook's eyes widened in panic and excitement already, but it's too early. He quickly composed himself, rushing to grab the hospital bag they had prepared. Mom, we need to go to the hospital now. Mrs. Jones sprang into action, her usual calm demeanor replaced by urgency. Don't worry, Vine, we are going to take good care of you. The drive to the hospital was a blur of emotions. Jungkook held Vine's hand the entire time, whispering words of encouragement, though his own heart was racing with anxiety. Mrs. Jones sat in the back seat, silently praying for a safe delivery. When they arrived at the hospital, the medical staff quickly took Vine to the delivery room. Jungkook stayed by her side, his hand never leaving hers. The labor was intense, and Vine struggled through the pain. But she remained strong, determined to bring the child into the world safely. After hours of labor, Vine finally heard the sound she had been waiting for, the first cry of their baby. Tears welled up in her eyes as the nurse placed the tiny newborn in her arms. It's a boy, the doctor announced with a smile. Jungkook's breath catch in his throat as he looked at the sun for the first time. He's perfect, Jungkook whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He leaned down and kissed Vine's forehead. Overwhelmed with love and gratitude, Mrs. Jones, who had been waiting anxiously outside, was finally allowed to see her grandson. She entered the room, her eyes filling with tears of joy as she saw the baby. He is beautiful, she said softly, her voice trembling with emotions. You have given us such a precious gift, Vine. Vine smiled, exhausted but overjoyed. We did it together, all of us. Jungkook sat beside Vine on the hospital bed, wrapping his arms around her and their newborn son. The three of them, along with Mrs. Jones, formed a tight circle of love and protection around the newest member of the Jones family.